During American involvement in the Vietnam War, 57,000 men lost their lives. Over 100,000 wounded were rescued. During air missions over the jungles of Vietnam and Laos, over 1,000 Americans were shot down or lost control of their planes. Their fellow officers were the last to see them alive. What happened to our servicemen who went down behind enemy lines? Men who were known to be alive on the ground. Could new evidence mean that Americans are still alive in the jungles of Indochina? Spring 1973, Operation Homecoming. American servicemen were coming home. Nearly 10 years have passed since that day of reunion. Today, the families of 2,500 men who didn't come home wonder what has become of them. Over 100 of those men were confirmed POWs at the war's end, and 1,300 were listed as missing in action. Bat Masterson was probably best known as a funny man, a kidder, a guy with a great sense of humor. He married Fran in the spring of 1968, and he headed off to war. 6 months later, while flying in formation over Laos, the pilot of another plane heard Bat's message of trouble. He was experiencing vertigo. He was bailing out. The years have not dimmed the memory of that day for Fran and her daughter Sherry.
All that day I had a very uneasy feeling, and I couldn't, my throat was like it was closing or something. I just felt very, very strange. And I was thinking of Bat all the time, and I felt like something had happened to him, but I wasn't sure. And the next day, it was about 11 o'clock on October the 14th, which in retrospect was the day after he had gone down. There was a knock at the door, and I opened the door, and there were 2 Air Force men at the door. And I knew something had happened to him, and I closed the door in their face. And one of them had gotten their foot in the door, and he was saying, "Mrs. Masterson," and I'm screaming at him to go away, go away. I didn't know what they were telling me. They said that, you know, your husband is missing in action, and I figured he was dead. I didn't know what missing in action really meant.
Colonel Bat Masterson was a professional soldier, a highly skilled officer trained to elude capture. He and his fellow Air Force officers were prepared to do whatever became necessary to survive in the jungles and make their way to safety. Whatever happened in those hours or days in the jungle may never be known. Did Bat Masterson disappear? Was he captured? Or were he and the other 1,300 M.I.A.s simply forgotten in the excitement of the war's end? Paris, 1973. Vietnam peace talks show progress. On January 27th, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger brings an official end to American involvement in Vietnam. The years of bloodshed end with a handshake. Peace is declared.
And tonight, the day we have all worked and prayed for has finally come. For the first time in 12 years, no American military forces are in Vietnam. All of our American POWs are on their way home.
But what became of the 1,300 M.I.A.s, the 100 known prisoners of war? Were they left behind enemy lines?
I believe there are men alive. I know there are men alive. whether one of them's my husband or not, I don't know that, of course.
Marion Volman was 13 when she met Charles Shelton, 18 when she married him. They raised a family and traveled from one air base to another. When Captain Shelton was captured in 1965, 5 children waited for his return home.
I circled the White House in a camper for a week, telling the public that the prisoners, not all the prisoners, came home. And I have been fighting with the United States government and appealing to the American public to do something to get accounting for these men.
Other wives and family members demanded answers. Family members like John Shelton, who was 9 years old when his father was taken prisoner.
I don't feel like the government has done all it can do, and I am bitter because I think that there are lies going on. I think that there are things that aren't being said, and I think they're trying to cover up.
It was very difficult to get an accounting for our missing people. It wasn't because the United States government was cold, was uncaring, or didn't want to in any way get an accounting for the missing. It was just that it was exceedingly difficult to get any cooperation from the other side.
Colonel John Furr spent 7 years in a Vietnamese prison camp. Today, he's the principal advisor for the Office of POW M.I.A. Affairs.
From my viewpoint, it's a frustrating situation that demands positiveness and a degree of optimism that one of these days we'll get cooperation from the Vietnamese to account for our missing.
Today, all but 13 of the 1,300 MIAs have been reclassified as presumed dead. Where is Captain Charles E. Shelton, who remains the last officially recognized prisoner of war? Confined to a wheelchair as a result of his treatment at the hands of his captors, former POW Thomas Nixon believes there are servicemen alive in Vietnam. His concern led him to serve as the National Service Officer for the American ex-prisoners of war.